I think when I see people who have going to bed late and waking up late, we call that delayed sleep phase disorder. It becomes a disorder. The disorder is defined by having an impact on the person, social and emotional, physical impact on the person. That typically comes from like superimposing some other kind of schedule on top of the delayed schedule that truncates the person's sleep. So for that example I gave, someone who goes to sleep at 2 a.m. and wakes up at 10 a.m., if that person has to get up at 7 a.m. to get to work or go to school, well, they're missing 3 hours, right? So they have a shortened sleep duration, and that can really mess with them.
Welcome everyone to It's Never About Money. As you know, we're exploring health this season, and not just the absence of illness, but the foundation of a good life, the kind of health that supports clear thinking, deep relationships and decisions aligned with our values, not to mention making good decisions with our money. And you can't talk about health without talking about sleep. My guest today is Associate Professor Simon Joosten, one of Australia's leading voices in sleep and respiratory medicine. He's a staff specialist at Monash Health, an academic at Monash University School of Clinical Sciences, and one of the country's highest ranked clinician scientists in sleep research. Simon's work bridges science, medicine, and everyday life. He's held leadership roles in national peak bodies like the Sleep Health Foundation, the Australasian Sleep Association, and the Thoracic Society of Australia and New Zealand. He's also received over $30 million in research funding, a sign of the scale and the seriousness of his contribution. Now, Simon doesn't often do media, which makes this conversation all the more special. We explore how sleep, or the lack of it, touches everything: decision-making, emotional regulation, longevity, even attention between our ancient biology and modern life. If you've ever sacrificed sleep in the name of productivity, struggled with waking in the night, or wondered why you feel wired at 10 p.m., this is the episode for you. Hi, Simon. How are you going? Thanks for coming and joining us. Just done the intro, as I said, and I almost forgot to press record, which would have been a big disaster. But how are you? And thanks for joining.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. It's good to see you. Yep, really excited to talk about sleep and see where this chat takes us.
Yeah, well, actually, I was thinking about it, and I just wondered, as a starting question, sleep's become very topical of late, but I imagine back when you were studying, it wasn't necessarily as popular as it is now. And so I sort of thought to myself, well, why would Simon have ended up in sleep? I wonder what is it? Is it just by inertia? Is there any personal reasons?
I get asked a lot. Like at the hospital, I train maybe 4 specialist doctors a year, and often they'll ask me things like, "Oh, why did you do this?" or "Why did you do that?" And it's probably just the most common of answers. I really admired a doctor I was working with at the hospital when I was training to be a lung specialist. So to be a sleep specialist, you have to train, first of all, to be a specialist. You have to have a medical degree, train to be a specialist, train to be a lung specialist, and then train to be a sleep specialist. So it's
Oh,
a pretty long path. And during that sort of process of becoming a lung specialist, one of my supervisors, yeah, I just really liked the way he went about things. Thought he was an excellent person, just a high quality individual, very smart. And so I kind of just wanted to be like him. And then I did a PhD with him, and that was kind of how I really got deep into being a sleep specialist.
do you think there was a point where you actually like looked at it and thought, "Oh my God, I didn't realize how important sleep was"? I know it seems kind of weird to ask this question now, given all that you know, but was there a point where you just thought, "Wow, I didn't realize how fundamental sleep was"?
I think for me, when I had that kind of realization was kind of through the prism of doing research. So when I was doing my PhD, we part of the job is to present your research at conferences, and I went to this conference. It's every year in America, and it's about 18,000 attendees, 18,000 specialists, ICU, respiratory, and sleep specialists. And it was presenting at that conference and then seeing how many people are thinking about sleep and all of the amazing sort of research that they do and things that they're finding out that made me kind of realize, like, what, wow, it is actually something that many people are very interested in. It must be important, by by
By
by sort
definition.
of, yeah.
Yeah, it was suggested to me, not suggested to me, I read somewhere that it would seem evolutionary, from an evolutionary perspective, nonsensical to have um, humans that can't defend themselves lying down for long periods of time if there was no evolutionary advantage in doing so. It almost seems, crazy, particularly coming from where we did, in, attacked by lions, tigers, or all the other threats that we would have had uh, back a long time ago.
That's interesting to think about, right? Because if someone said to you, your life and everything you know depends on not going to sleep tonight, well, I think you could very easily stay awake for one night, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like sleep is inevitable, like the rising and setting of the sun. Sleep is still something that you can behaviorally override. So although it sort of does seem prima facie to be counter productive, or maybe even a non-advantage, that you can behaviorally override it means that it doesn't really play out like that, to my mind. And actually there are some interesting neurobiological aspects of sleep that show us that when you're asleep, your whole brain is not all asleep. Parts of it are still awake.
Yeah.
The experiments that I remember that show this kind of phenomenon are rat experiments where they showed that the part of the rat's brain that codes for the whiskers remains attentive and alert during sleep. So that if you play with the rat's whiskers, that part of the brain notices and wakes the rest of the brain up. So that part of the brain isn't actually asleep. It's still awake when the organism is asleep, right? So even though you are asleep, you can still wake up if a car honks the horn out the front, or if a possum jumps on your roof. You're not actually you're more vulnerable, but you're not ultimately vulnerable. You can forego sleep, or B, wake up from sleep.
Mm, mm. So Eli, as an example with sleep apnea, this sort of uh, almost forgetting to breathe kind of scenario. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is, but it seems that way. And then the sort of explosion of breath, is the explosion of breath the body kind of just recognizing something's going on here, and we need to intervene? Like, how does it
That
work?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yeah.
There's two kinds of sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea is the most common one, and that's where someone has a blockage in their throat, a narrowing or blockage in their throat. When that happens, it's like essentially being choked. The person's mostly unaware of this, but what happens is their oxygen drops and their carbon dioxide goes up, and their brain senses that it doesn't like it, and it interrupts their sleep momentarily, so that all the muscles in their throat come back online and they breathe again, and then they just go straight back to sleep. So usually the person who's suffering from recurrent or repetitive um, obstructive events like that, they're usually unaware of them. They can happen every minute that the person's asleep and the person's none the wiser.
Interesting. So, I was interested in the comments you were making around how we can behaviorally change our patterns of sleep. And I'm talking now on behalf of my brother James, as you know, who has 3 kids, who absolutely loves to exercise and will get up at literally 4 a.m. to get into the gym at 4:30 a.m. Now, when I ask him his sleep scores off his Aura ring, which he got recently, I mean, he's sometimes getting 5 hours or 6 hours. Now, I know I can't really function on that, but he seems to be okay. I suppose the question is, what are the, like, should he be concerned about it? What are the detrimental sort of issues of not having a full length of sleep? If I could be so bold as to say that a full length of sleep is definitely not 5 hours, in my mind. So yeah.
Yeah, there's heaps in that. There's
Yeah.
heaps to think about in that question. I reckon that like from a duration perspective, it's pretty clear that when people start to truncate their sleep, especially under 6 hours, chronically under 6 hours per night, then they start to make mistakes. their
Yep.
performance drops measurably.
Yep.
Um, but they, but and this is a kind of a dangerous mix. Their perception of how they're performing doesn't change. The person who's chronically sleep deprived feels sleepy, but they believe that they're performing adequately. But you can demonstrate through reaction time tests, things like that, that they are actually performing poorly.
So when we say performing poorly, Simon, are we talking about certain tasks? Are we talking about emotional capability? Like what is, or is it all of the above?
There's lots of different ways that performance gets measured scientifically. The most, probably the deepest literature is around this thing called psychomotor vigilance performance test, PVT. It's basically a reaction time test measured in milliseconds, and you can show that someone's reaction times get slower and slower and slower. That's like a simple task, right? When you see a square on the screen, press this button. When you see a circle on the screen, press this button. If it's a
Yep.
red, that kind of processing um, is not very complicated. So you can imagine that like more complex tasks are probably also um, at risk for someone who's chronically sleep deprived. We know that sleep deprivation is associated with low mood, depression, difficulty concentrating. So it can manifest in those emotional aspects of life as well. Absolutely.
Mm. So like, where's the crossover? Like if you were to make a decision as to um, getting up a little earlier to go and do your exercise versus sleeping a little bit more and not doing your exercise, you know, the benefits of exercise are pretty well known, particularly on longevity. It seems that based upon some of the questionnaires that I've seen and some of the sort of longevity um, literature that I've read, that one of the biggest determinants of longevity is your capacity to exercise. So maybe even I don't know, maybe even more so than the full night's sleep. I'm not sure, but like, how do you see it?
I think you should have both.
Yeah, well, yeah, 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 no
why
doubt, no
not?
doubt.
Why not have both? I think
Yep, yep,
sleep is something that is by virtue of our essentially our the way our culture and society is set up. Sleep is something that gets sacrificed first,
yeah,
um, and that is because um, straight away when you spend sleep, when you sacrifice sleep, shorten sleep duration, you don't really pay the price there and then. But you know what it's like. If you put money in the bank or in an investment, you're looking at years down the track is when the benefits are sort of fully realized. And I think the same problem can happen with sleep. People spend their sleep in the short term, but in the long term, that might not be the smartest thing to do.
mm,
When people come to the clinic, I think that what they want is what it's the physician's job in a way to inform the person, but really what they want is what you have to provide. So in some ways, sacrificing sleep might be of benefit to a person if they're gaining some other thing that's of higher value to them at that point in time. Um, and I don't know, like I kind of feel like in a way, as long as the person is aware that that it's likely that they're going to be performing poor, worse than if they were getting more sleep, and that their mood's likely to be affected. If they can wear those consequences, then that's a decision that they should make for themselves. Um, but as long as they're aware.
yeah. Because I remember like the Rock, Dwayne Johnson, talks about the fact that he barely sleeps to get as much in as possible. He's quite successful, obviously, but I think the idea that that doesn't come at a cost, and that people will say, I just don't need as much sleep. I think that's a bit of a fallacy. Would you agree?
Strongly. And when you think about like, if you think Dwayne Johnson's an interesting example, right? Like think about the height. Think about height as an individual parameter, right? There's people of different heights, and there's like a normal distribution of height, but you know that there are outliers for height, right? So someone who's incredibly tall probably has growth hormone excess, so they've got gigantism, which is like a disease that will shorten their life.
Yep.
And similarly, on the lower scale, someone who's incredibly short probably has a skeletal abnormality. Um, which will again probably truncate the length of their life. And I think sleep's kind of the same. If you're in the middle, if you're on the bell-shaped curve in the 95%, 7 to 9 hours, then you're probably okay. But if you're an outlier, more than 10 hours, less than 4 hours, then I think that will probably, I mean, there's longitudinal data to suggest that that's associated with shorter lifespan, and we can't judge the rock until we know the full length of his life, right?
No, no. Well,
Like when
well, that's right.
we don't know when he's gonna drop off. He might drop off in his 60s or his 70s. We don't know.
And I dare say there'd be some other chemicals that might be flowing through his body as well. So I'm not sure how that all works. Okay, can you take me through actually when we talk about what a healthy night's sleep might look like, the architecture of a healthy night's sleep?
Yeah, I think that timing and duration are probably the key like pillars of healthy sleep. So timing means that the habit, the process of going to sleep happens at the same kind of clock time each night. It's a repetitive behavior.
Mm-hmm.
This is boring, right? People talk about like, oh, how can you hack your sleep and all this other kind of stuff. It's total nonsense. The most important thing is the boring, repetitive behavioral aspect of timing of sleep. I brush my teeth at 9:30. I put on my pajamas. I get into bed and read a book for 15 minutes. Then I turn out the light and go to sleep. The alarm goes off at 6 a.m. and I get up and I have a cereal. That's like so boring, right? But every single night, if that's repeated, that's incredibly healthy. And in fact, timing of sleep, clock timing of sleep, is in some studies shown to be more important than duration of sleep. So
Wow.
timing is critical. The behavior and timing of sleep needs to be repetitive. It's reinforced from childhood onwards. When you change that, you are sacrificing something for sure. Now, it's impossible to be a monk. We don't, we're not monks, and we have to socialize. We're social creatures, if you like. But timing is important, and then
I has
duration.
I hazard a guess that from a timing perspective, that it was much easier to develop a pattern of timing, a long time ago before this sort of industrialization of the world. With the advent of things that keep us up and can, overstimulate us and change the pattern. I imagine now it's a real challenge, more so than it probably was in the past. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a professor at uni where I work he has this, he's got this turn of phrase that I find so funny. He talks about the advent of the electric light. It's like it's like the advent of the electric light. Like what the hell? Um, but just being able to have a light on and stay awake later
Yeah.
is kind of what I think is what he's getting at. Yeah, you're right. And now we've got so much more. Like I got this thing, I carry this thing around with me. The whole
Yeah.
world is in here, like
Yeah.
all known human knowledge and AI and all sorts of other crazy stuff is in there. It's so tempting to be like, oh, I wonder about that thing, or what did they say, or what's happening in America, or what's going on over there. And yeah, I think in order to enter that process and be repetitive and have it happen the same each time, we have to shield ourselves a little bit from outside distractions. So you want to, I think behaviorally, it's probably healthy to keep things simple from that perspective.
Mhm.
It's definitely so hard, isn't it? It's so hard. There's
Oh,
so many distractions.
it's yeah. I mean, I find it really difficult. Actually, the timing is more of an issue for me than the duration, for sure. So I wonder, like, is there a sort of way to explain to me as a layperson why timing actually matters?
It's all to do with the circadian rhythm.
Right.
So, by virtue of evolving on Earth, well, all known living organisms um, have kind of like an internal clock. Um, you know, there are so many processes, biological processes that exist on this circadian rhythm, um, and sleep is one of them. So, our bodies want us to sleep at the same kind of time each night. Your internal body clock for sleep actually runs slightly longer than 24 hours. So the propensity is to go to sleep later and later each night if you don't get natural light exposure. So
Mm.
natural light actually brings the circadian rhythm forwards just a little bit each day. So having natural light's key to the process as
So
well.
this is great. This is great because this crosses over on a couple of podcasts I've already recorded.
Mm,
So as an example, natural light is also incredibly important for the hormone levels that we have in our bodies, and the amount, as an example, for females or males, testosterone levels and so on. But also the alertness that we have at work and the amount of light that we have within our offices and so on is really, really important, as Hannah Conkey actually talked about too. So this idea of light has crossed over a number of streams of health, natural light, which is, I think, something we might, again, take for granted because, we don't think about it necessarily as much. And we're kind of locked in sometimes, a lot of us, into, offices, sort of white-walled jail cells a little at times.
yes. And
Yeah.
Australia is the skin cancer capital of the world, right? So
Yes,
we are really careful about being outside in the blazing hot sun.
that's true.
For sleep, the timing of the circadian clock can be manipulated by exposure to bright light. So it doesn't have to be natural light for this purpose. It needs to be the strongest wavelength is blue green,
Yep.
and it needs to be of intensity like 3000 lux or higher. This is like the kind of light that, have you ever been driving to work or driving around and the sun's kind of reflecting off every surface and you're like, oh man, I can't even look at the road.
Yep. Yep.
That's how bright the light needs to be if you really want to manipulate someone's body clock. But it is interesting, isn't it? Sunlight's something that is has supposed to have been around for like 4 billion years or 6 billion years. So it's only natural that like every organism that exists on this planet like has some kind of important intrinsic link to sunlight, no doubt.
Yep, for sure. So we've kind of talked about the importance of the timing, the duration. You know, is there a differentiation in terms of enough sleep from a time perspective, and then the quality of that sleep?
Yeah, I think so. I was looking at this. We had after our after we had a chat the other day, I was looking at this a bit more in depth, and it's clear that there is, they call it a U-shaped relationship between sleep duration and um, a number of important outcomes like cognition or longevity. And the cutoffs they use are pretty extreme. So um, people who habitually sleep 4 hours or less, or people who habitually sleep 10 hours or more, um, they have problems. They live shorter lives, um, and they have difficulties with cognition, particularly with memory. The trick is it's not really clear from those studies what's causing what by nature of the way the studies are designed. There's no control group, so you don't know, you can't attribute causation, and there's many other things potentially going on. Like as an example, short sleep duration, actually long sleep duration is has a more statistically powerful impact on cognition and longevity, which is interesting. Um, but short sleep duration, it could be a sign of some other thing going on. It could be an early marker of cognitive decline,
Mm.
or it could be causative. No one really knows. But I think that when people are in those extremes, less than 4 hours, more than 10 hours, yeah, that something's going on for that person. And those are the kinds of people I see in the sleep clinic, where they're at those extremes.
Now the length of duration where it's not a behavior, sort of an environmental effect, but it almost seems like a biological situation where there's either an increasing amount of duration or reduction in duration. Is that sometimes linked to certain illnesses or diseases, and which ones do they tend to, you know, does it tend to sort of traverse? Is, like, as an example, shorter duration sleep in people who are getting older, is that more likely to indicate potentially cognitive decline, Alzheimer's, that sort of thing? Is that something you can speak to, or is that difficult to speak to?
It's complicated, but I think that really that sort of that idea has been present for a long time. Like that U-shaped relationship has been found in a number of studies.
Yep.
and it's information that has made it into like the public domain, if you like.
Yes.
I think that I think that it's well known and documented that sleep duration does diminish across the lifespan, but not by that much. Not so that people go from sleeping, 12 hours as a kid, 10 hours as a young adult, 8 hours as an adult, 7 hours as someone in their 70s or 80s. That's like that's well understood and well described. I think when people really fall off the short end, yeah, that's concerning. There are lots of things that could be causing that, or that can lead to. Probably the most common things I see in the clinic are mental health issues like depression and anxiety. Um, but yeah, when people um, when people have illness, it understandably can manifest in shortened sleep duration. Even pain is an obvious one to think about. If someone's living with pain, and they roll around during the night, which is totally normal, then that triggers their pain, and then they're awake. Um, it's easy to see that there can be an intersection with ill health and short sleep duration. But I think at a population level, it's a bit more difficult to know around the sort of normal value. It's a bit more difficult to know, like, what's the difference between, let's say someone's 75, what's the difference between 7 hours and 6.25 hours? No one really knows, like, at that fidelity, what the implications are. That could be totally within normal limits. To find significant, statistically significant health differences or cognition differences, researchers have to go to the extremes. So we know that the extremes are associated with these things, but no one's really sure about sort of the wobble around normal. Like, um, yeah, I think if someone's been, I mean, I think tracking sleep is something interesting you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
If someone notices that if someone has longitudinal, I think longitudinal data, individual data that over a long period of time can be quite useful. If someone notices, let's say they've had an Apple Watch, for instance, just as an example of a product, it could be anything like a Garmin or an Oura Ring, like you say.
Hmm.
Let's say they've had that device for 3 years, right? They don't really check it that much, but they've been collecting the data. And then they notice that their mood has changed. They feel down, they're worried, they notice their sleep's a bit more fragmented, and then they check in on their data and they can see now they're sleeping 6.5 hours per night, whereas before they were sleeping 7.5 hours per night.
Mm,
That's
mm,
powerful. Those
mm.
kinds of findings, people come to the clinic and show me that kind of data, and it can be very useful like that. So I think when you notice a change over time, I think from an individual perspective, that can be quite useful.
Yeah, because it's interesting because, like, obviously there's a rise in mental health related issues for probably a number of reasons, which we won't necessarily get into. But often people feel that the response to that is to treat the mental health issue, and there's nothing wrong with this, of course, because it's sometimes required, but with a kind of whether it be a talk therapy or anything like that, and the intervention may be that might be even more valuable in some instances, may be a rectification of a sleep problem, as an example. Or an amount of natural light problem, or an amount of getting moving and exercising, sort of getting a more of a physical related intervention rather than a mental intervention. I'm not saying that for every single case. I'm no mental health expert, but it just appears that way to me.
I've seen like that is a simple case that comes up from time to time in the clinic. As an example, someone who the most consistent finding for people with severe obstructive sleep apnea, which is a sleep fragmentation, a sleep quality issue,
Yeah, yep.
the most consistent finding in treatment studies is if you treat obstructive sleep apnea, the person feels less depressed. So occasionally, maybe every couple of years, I'll meet a person with depression who has severe sleep apnea, and when you treat their severe sleep apnea, they feel less depressed and can come off their medicines. It doesn't happen that often, and it's very simple and straightforward. And usually, those simple cases that's low hanging fruit. Like those are easy cases that GPs and psychiatrists will pick off early, right? More often, for me, it's very hard. I find it very difficult to know what's causing what, because there exists a bidirectional relationship between these things. Mood affects sleep. It's easy to think about that.
Mm,
If you're
mm,
worried,
mm.
if you're worried and you go to sleep, you're going to wake up at 3 a.m. and start thinking about whatever you're worried about. That's the human condition.
Yep.
But also, if you start restricting someone's sleep or wreck the quality of their sleep, they
You
get
can start
depressed.
worrying.
They get depressed and anxious. There's like this, and sometimes it becomes this beast that like feeds on itself, and people just get in a real mess, and that's when they end up in the clinic. It can be really challenging to know what's causing what or what came first. And
But isn't it also likewise, Simon, helpful to know that if it's either direction, you have the capacity potentially, if you can try to solve for. So if you've got the mental worry and the anxiousness, then you can try to solve for the physical side if possible, which might be an intervention. It's kind of helpful to know that.
yeah, I think so. I mean, it helps us see clearly that sleep is important. I think it reiterates that point. The hard thing about sleep though is, let's say someone's not sleeping enough, right? And they're worried. You can't really just say to them, "Why don't you sleep more?"
Yeah, well,
It's
that's true.
like it doesn't work like that. It's not. You can't sort of dial it up and go, "Oh, instead of 6, I'm going to have 7.5 tonight."
Yep.
It's tricky, right? Because often, well, you know what sleep's like. It's like this letting go process where you kind of have to be comfortable, be sleepy, and then you kind of just dissolve and you're kind of not there anymore. If
Okay.
someone's worried and depressed, it's really difficult for them to do that. They keep focusing and arousing and thinking about things.
Yes, yes.
So even if you know that someone's not sleeping enough, yeah, you have to implement behavioral strategies um, to help them sleep more, rather than, it's not as simple as saying, it's not as simple as just saying there's not enough sleep occurring here, get more sleep. It's hard. It's really hard.
Notwithstanding that point, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I agree. I think I take it for granted that I tend to have the one thing in my life that's been relatively easy. Touch wood, I'll touch it now. Sleep has been great for me. But like, what are what are the protocols that you would follow to enhance the chances that you would get a really good quality night's sleep? And what are the things that you absolutely wouldn't do? Because I know, as an example, I'm pretty sure sleeping pills are not a solution. What I've heard, it's not a way of actually getting you into normative sleep cycles. It sounded like, when I was reading about it, more like a tranquilizer more than anything else. But I'll let you, if you'd like to, talk about that. Yeah.
So I think there's heaps in that as well. I think that the behaviors around sleep are critically important to ensuring a good night's sleep, if you like. When that's going wrong, like insomnia, difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep, it's a very, very common disorder. Maybe 1/4 of community dwelling people will experience insomnia for 6 weeks or more at some point in their life. Incredibly common disorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are many, many causes, but if you take populations of people with no comorbidities, so they don't have mental illness and no other sort of medical problems, the most powerful intervention you can give that person is called, it's an umbrella term. It's called sleep psychology. This is a combination of strategies. There's maybe 4 or 5 strategies that you can use that are not medication related, but that in many, many clinical trials are proven to be more powerful than medications for this population of people who have no other comorbidities. So it includes cognitive behavioral therapy. It includes potentially sleep restriction. It includes relaxation techniques. It includes attention to sleep hygiene, which is like the PC term for the behaviors leading into sleep. Um, and that sort of intervention, sleep psychology, that's like a specialty of psychology. There are psychologists who are sleep psychologists, right?
Oh, I didn't even know that. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like it's a massive thing.
yeah.
Um, it's massive. I think that what's the most important? I think probably the most important things are trying to do things repetitively,
Mm-hmm.
keep it boring, keep it simple.
So,
And
like
that
on
might be
the sleep hygiene front, as an example, keep it boring, keep it. What are the things that you could do?
everyone's different. Think about this. I mean, I'll give you an example of like a universal example, perhaps. But think about this for a second. Have you ever seen those films where people go to bed, they've got their pajamas on, it's like a Disney film or whatever, and then they have like this big glass of warm milk? It's like that seems like the most disgusting thing you could ever do. Drink warm milk before bed makes me want to kind of like makes me feel
Yeah,
sick.
yeah.
But for some people, that's their thing, right? So these behaviors that you do before sleep, because you do them over and over, they become like subconsciously linked with sleep. As an example, when you're brushing your teeth, which is like what most people do before going to bed, they'll brush their teeth already, even without thinking about it consciously, already subconsciously, their brain is, their mind is feeling like, I know what happens next. You're going to put on your pajamas and then you're going to jump into bed and then you're going to go
Interesting.
to sleep,
Bit of a
because they
Pavlov's
do that.
dog sort of situation. Yeah.
Absolutely, because that's who we are. That's the human condition, is to be sort of conditioned to these behaviors, especially when they're done in the same kind of way, repetitively, at the same kind of time each night. It is almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. So I think that's why, I mean, I'm speculating a little bit here, but I think that's probably why timing is found to be in some studies more important than duration, because I suspect that timing is linked to these repetitive behaviors that once you start doing them, because you've done them for years, you automatically know without even thinking about it what's going to happen next. It builds confidence, it builds repetitive sort of reassurance. I think that's why hacking and stuff like that, it's just nonsense. It's
Yeah.
complete nonsense, because the most important thing is the boring thing. It's just doing the same thing each night.
So it's worth
Um,
persevering, as a, like for those who are parents out there with children who are struggling to sleep, it's worth persevering with trying to be repetitive and pattern based and putting in signals and cues for the children to follow so that they are naturally getting drowsy at the right times, and not having this sort of problem of, you know, constant compromise before bed to try to get them to sleep.
yeah, well, I can speak as a parent, not really as a pediatrician, because I'm an adult doctor, but I think that the things that um, the things that kids find most reassuring are the things that are sort of like guaranteed. It's guaranteed that mum and dad are going to be there. It's guaranteed that they're safe. It's guaranteed that their bedroom is their bedroom. It's guaranteed that 8 p.m. is time to brush your teeth. These things, as they get repeated and repeated and repeated, they become like concrete. They become things that you can hang your hat on. I think for adults, one thing that I see pretty frequently is that people find it difficult to create a buffer before sleep. We've been talking about timing of sleep and duration of sleep, but like as an example, I've never met, like I probably have 1,000 appointments a year with patients, and for the last 15 years, I have not met a single person who can come home from work and go to sleep straight away. Never. It's not possible. I've
Mm,
never seen it happen before. There
mm.
has to be some kind of buffer between the end of the workday and going to sleep. Usually people, even if they work horrible shift, they'll come home, they'll have a shower, have a bite to eat, put on their pajamas, brush their teeth, and then they'll get into bed. So there's a buffer, right? When you finish your day, it would be very unusual for a person to expect to be able to put the lid down on their laptop and lie down and go to sleep. It doesn't work like that.
No.
That's nonsense.
Mm.
You have to put the lid down on the laptop and go, the workday's done. Okay, now I'm going to let all of that go and start the process of getting ready for sleep, right?
And this is where people are on their phones and the rest of it, which is just
All
causing.
that kind of stuff. It can delay those things, right? Because when you're
Yeah,
on your phone, I don't know what it's like for you, but I'm like on the emails, and someone will have emailed me and I'll be like, oh man, I got to think about that now, and
yeah, yep,
oh, I better not forget to do that other thing, and shit, I got to, there's
yeah,
so many
yeah,
sort of things that come on from just one email, right?
yeah.
So many thoughts that come from one email. You better, like, for me, there's this sleep psychology strategy called stimulus control. It's easy to explain, but pretty hard to do. Stimulus control means the bedroom is for being asleep or being with your partner, and that's it. That's it, right? Nothing else gets in there. So physically, you can think, okay, the phone never comes in there. I'm not going to have a TV in here. If I take this to the extreme, no books, nothing. I'm not going to wear a watch. Nothing else comes in here. And then you try to extend that to thoughts, right? So you leave your thoughts out. You leave your thoughts outside the bedroom as well.
Yeah.
Stimulus control. So I think like that's it. That's that kind of intervention, when taken to its extreme, can be a powerful intervention. But you can take aspects of that and easily apply them. I never bring my phone into the unless I'm on call at the hospital, which is like 8 weeks a year. I never bring my phone into the bedroom.
That's a
Mm-mm,
great idea. That's a great
no
idea. I
way.
think that's low hang. Well, it's low
Yes.
hanging fruit in some respects, and in other respects, it's not. But yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I also know you can dispel these if you wish, but I just wondered whether having a cooler room, having a hot shower, before bed, um, any sort of meditative or breath work, is any of that valuable
Some of
in
that
your?
some of that falls under the warm glass of milk idea.
Okay.
It depends on the person, but body temperature is 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 linked to the circadian rhythm. So your core body temperature, it goes in the opposite direction to melatonin. As your body's pumping melatonin, which is the sleep hormone, as melatonin goes up, core body temperature goes down.
Yep.
So for a person who sleeps habitually between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., their core body temperature will be at its lowest at about 2 a.m., right? Um, your body will try and lose, so your body tries to lose heat in the first half of the night. It usually does that through high surface area parts of your body like hands and feet. So you might have experienced this. People don't think about it that often, but when people get into bed, sometimes their feet are cold, but then when they wake up, their feet are warm.
Mm.
It's because their body's trying to lose heat through their feet and hands during the course of the night. So being able to cool down is part of the sleep, is part of the circadian rhythm, part of the sleep process. And sometimes when people wake up during the night and they're hot and kind of wriggly, we encourage them to get out of bed, do something boring and cool down. Like if they're in bed and uncomfortable and they're hot, that's not good. That's counter to, it's kind of counterproductive for sleep. So
So
getting
to,
out of bed and cooling down can be very important in that situation.
so to draw on your sort of what you've just suggested, having a hot shower is what I understood was that it actually moves the blood flow from sort of the core areas into the hands and feet, and then when you're sort of out back into the cold, it kind of, that evaporation reduces your core body temperature, and that's why you're pushing yourself to be more drowsy before sleep. Does that make sense?
It could be plausible. It's
Yeah.
plausible. I think that when I think about warm shower before bed, it does kind of feel like a warm glass of milk scenario,
Okay.
because
Mm-hmm.
imagine a warm shower when you're not rushing to go to work or, you know, yeah, having to wash your hair or whatever. A warm shower can be a very relaxing time. In the shower, often people aren't bothered. No one's calling them up on the telephone. Their family members aren't in the bathroom sort of saying, "Can you get me this?" or "What about that?" It's time. It's like solitude and relaxing time. So I think if it's a warm shower is like something someone does every single night, then it becomes part of that routine. They feel relaxed, they get some time to themselves, they know what happens next, they're going to brush their teeth and so on and so forth. I think that there's a plausible mechanism by which you're talking about heat loss. Yeah, that might work. I think it's not impossible.
Okay. Okay. So I think maybe I probably should have asked this question earlier on to set up a little bit, but I think people listening now, they go like, okay, you've kind of talked about some of the problems relating to a lack of sleep, but really, what is sleep helping me with, like with respect to the physical side? What is it doing from a physical perspective, a cognitive, a mental perspective? Is there, you know, could you kind of take us through like the amazing benefits of sleep? Like,
Yeah, it's interesting. Like in a way, I think you're asking like, what's the neurobiological basis for sleep? What does it
Yes,
do to
yes,
humans? I think there is for the last, for about the last 11 or 12 years, there's been like a prevailing idea about what sleep does to our brain at like a molecular level, at a neurotransmitter level. Um, and the idea comes from a series of experiments that were published in about 2013. They're rat studies, but it was essentially the culmination of a decade of rat experiments, which demonstrated that sleep um, kind of cleans away all of the neurotransmitter debris from a day. So when your brain's firing off neurotransmitters, it recycles them, but also some of the byproducts sort of accumulate. And sleeping, at least in this study, rats that slept or had anesthetic, those neurotransmitter byproducts were cleaned or swept out of the brain. It's like a neurotransmitter hypothesis for why sleep is of benefit. In the last year or two, there's been kind of like a scientific war going on about if that's true or not, because another big lab in America found something different to that. So the prevailing hypothesis at the moment is that at a molecular level, sleep helps us clean our brain of neurotransmitter byproducts and debris from a day. There are lots of other prevailing hypotheses, like that sleep, because it's a slightly lower metabolic state, allows for some sort of rest to occur in our body, in different organs. Um, yeah, that it gives us an opportunity to consolidate memories, perhaps. Um, there are sort of hypotheses like that. I think the strongest hypothesis, at least until a year or so ago, was this neurotransmitter hypothesis.
yeah. It's interesting because you talk about it in as a hypothesis, and it's interesting the way some literature comes out, and again, it's not research necessarily, but individuals writing books on sleep, they're quite determined to say that this is the way it is, but it sounds like it's still relatively contentious. It's not in 100% known exactly. Um, like as an example, non-REM versus REM sleep. What are the functions of non-REM versus REM? And it sounded like, to be very basic about this, that non-REM was about the physical aspects of restorative sleep, and then REM was more about the sort of you talked sort of the emotional state and and the mental side of functioning.
You know what people are like, Joe? They don't like uncertainty. They don't
That's
like
true.
uncertainty.
That's so
But
true.
but science is a pursuit. Science is trying to put some level of confidence on an idea. We're this amount confident that this is a factor, or we're this amount confident that the importance of this is this magnitude. It's a pursuit of some kind of truth, right? But the way science works, it gets better and better. So if you're watching a TV from that's black and white, well, you're only going to get a black and white picture. If you're watching a 4K TV that's 75 inches, well, you're going to see every blade of grass and everything else going on. You can take more into account. I think science is like that. It gets higher fidelity. It gets sort of enriched. Um, One study might point in one direction, another study will pull in another direction, then there'll be three more studies pulling in the initial direction. So there's like many sort of competing directions. Things get done in different ways. People come with biases that they're unaware of. It's so complicated. Um, it's so complicated. I think that people who sell books, they're selling books, right? So they want to give you a story. That's
They
what
do.
it's like. It's a story, right?
Yep.
Um, and they have to be certain, because like, who would buy a book where someone says, well, I'm not exactly sure because this says this and that says that. We're 80% confident this is probably a factor, but we don't know exactly because it's rats, and no one's
Yeah.
going to buy that book. That's
No,
like
that's right.
boring academia talk.
That's
So when
right.
people like sell books, so I think those books are interesting. There's probably like nuggets of truth and stuff in them.
It's almost like they
Um,
might have a metaphorical truth. It might pay to believe their story because, in the end, seems to be some correlation between this and that, but it's not entirely known. But generally, if you, sleep the 8 hours, you're going to be okay.
yes,
Um,
I think the basic truths are probably like that, right?
yeah,
And I don't want to when people absorb information like that and it makes them feel good or they get something out of it, that's I'm not trying to say that's not powerful. That's awesome. Um, but I think that when people talk about, like, in my world, um, I say things with a, like, I want to know how confident I am about this or that. And confidence is a scale, right? It's not like 0 and 1. It's like, how confident can I be that this is the case? We use statistics um, and analyses like that to demonstrate or show people the amount of confidence, at least people who understand the statistics. I
hmm
think when I go back to that question about non-REM and REM, these are really like, REM sleep is such a weird it's such a weird, like, mode for a human to be in. It's so strange where your body is completely paralyzed, right?
yeah,
From the eyeballs down,
yeah.
your body cannot move. Your eyes are sort of flicking around and your brain becomes metabolically active, like, sometimes more active than when you're awake, but not but like more metabolically active than non-REM sleep, right? Like, it's such a strange thing to think
It's
that
also
happens.
strange
Like,
to think about, like the fact that if you weren't immobilized in that particular time, you might act out on some of your dreams, right?
that
Like
happens. Yeah, that happens.
that's what happens, right?
I see people with that disorder. It's called REM behavior disorder. It can happen. Yeah, but non-REM sleep is, like you say, it's. I think the way you cased it is a good way to think about it. Non-REM sleep. I talk about this with my patients all the time, although no one ever does it. Imagine if you turned a computer off at the screen, then you turn the computer off at the hard drive, then you turn the computer off at the power point. Non-REM sleep, there's 3 stages, like getting switched off at the screen, switched off at the hard drive, switched off at the power point. You get deeper and deeper asleep. Slow wave sleep, like, your brain waves are really slow, like, delta waves, and yeah, it's like being really switched off, and you go from that part of sleep, that portion of sleep, to this other, like, totally weird, paralyzed but brain super active kind of sleep. And you've got to have both kinds. You've got to have both kinds of sleep in the right proportion. And that comes from repetitively having sleep at the same sort of time each night.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'd read about some studies where there was interrupted REM sleep, and it caused more issues around people being able to judge each other's emotional expressions and things of that nature, um, which was interesting to me. So, and also I think they were talking about stuff like PTSD. People with PTSD struggle with sleep, and what they often require is the full gamut of sleep, mostly for the REM to be able to process the trauma associated with whatever they went through, and that's why sleeping pills as well are not fantastic because it sort of doesn't allow them to get into the full sort of depth of the sleep cycle.
Yeah, PTSD is its own beast, right? For sure. I think that like, thinking about REM sleep and what it does, those, I like the experiments that you talked about, which I haven't looked at them before, but where they're pretty common kinds of experiments where, if you want to find out what REM sleep does,
Yeah.
then stop someone from having it. So they do that. They, like, watch people sleep, and then when they hit REM sleep, they, like, play a noise or they poke them, and they kind of reduce the amount of REM sleep they get. And then the next day, they test them in a bunch of ways.
Yep.
But, like, these are often like 1 or 2 night studies. They're not like,
They're not very long.
yeah, and they're sort of, they're limited in, like, how much you can poke and prod someone and how much you can test them the next day and what else is going on for them. But it is really interesting to wonder about, like, what does REM sleep do? It's clear that you need it, and it has to be in the right kind of proportions, about 20, 25% of the night.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
So Simon, I'm mindful of time as well. As I said to you at the start, I wasn't sure exactly how long it would go, but I love this topic. But I think in the world that we live in currently, I've had Hannah Conkey talk about setting up the office environment in such a way to deal with the differences in human beings, like neurodiversity as an example, may require a different sort of office environment, a different way. And in this world that we have, one of the advantages, which I'd like to say, because often I'm somewhat cynical on some of the issues that we have in today's society, but one of the advantages is that we're really caring about, individual differences and so on. And that leads me to think about chronotypes and this idea that, actually the time at which we sleep and then we get up for each person may be different based upon our own unique biology, which then lends itself to, well, why is everyone going to school at the same time? And is it okay that people work different timings? So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what do you think about chronotypes and whether there's some validity to the idea that we should be able to, understand when our peak alertness is, as an example.
Yeah, chronotypes is kind of like a way of grouping people into clusters of when they go to sleep and when they wake up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like grouping people. It's grouping people based on their circadian propensity. The easiest examples are like early birds or night owls. So early bird might be someone who goes to sleep early and wakes up early. They get 8 hours duration, but perhaps it's between 8:30 and 4:30, 8:30 p.m. and 4:30 a.m. Or a night owl might be someone who goes to sleep at 2 a.m. and wakes up at 10 a.m. And then a standard kind of sleep might be more like when the sun's down, like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., something like that. Um, these the biological aspects that determine someone's circadian rhythm, they do differ from person to person. How much light affects one person, um, the timing and duration of exposure. These things are becoming more and more understood to be like genetically coded, at least in part. There's a massive behavioral overlay, like heaps of what we've been talking about is behavior. But there is I think that it's clear that there are people who wake up early and go to bed early and people who wake up late and go to bed late. I think when I see people who have like going to bed late and waking up late, we call that delayed sleep phase disorder. It becomes a disorder. The disorder is defined by it having an impact on the person, social and emotional, physical impact on the person. That typically comes from like superimposing some other kind of schedule on top of the delayed schedule that truncates the person's sleep. Um, so for that example I gave, someone who goes to sleep at 2 a.m. and wakes up at 10 a.m., if that person has to get up at 7 a.m. to get to work or go to school, well, they're missing 3 hours, right? So they have a shortened sleep duration, and that can really mess with them. There are ways to manipulate a body clock earlier with bright light, like we were talking about earlier, and there are behavioral interventions as well. But I do, I do, patients who have delayed sleep phase, usually they're only sleeping 8 hours, same as everyone else,
Mm.
but they still get, it does kind of irk me that they often, well, I'll say sometimes they describe to me, patients with delayed sleep phase disorder, they describe to me situations where they've been called like lazy bones or sleepyhead or something
I
like
was
that.
gonna say, like, as an example with children, like the battle that you might have with a child over another child is to get them to sleep, maybe to relate it to their chronotype, and also the types of rhetoric or what they hear from their teachers with respect to their performance or their motivation or their level of laziness and all of that, maybe related to peak alertness and the timing of when their unique body decides to, switch on. And I find that somewhat sad in a sense.
It's difficult, isn't it? I mean, you're right. If someone has a usual sleep time, wakes up at 6 a.m., they sort of hit peak performance late morning, midday, and their core body temperature is at its highest at that point as well. I think that there is an interesting maybe it's an interesting philosophical pressure point about how much we value the individual versus how powerful is it to organize as
Mm,
a collective. When you
mm,
think about institutions
mm,
like school, um, it must be very difficult for the people who organize those institutions or those bureaucratic arms of government. It must be very difficult for them to account for all the individual differences. I don't envy the people who have to make the decisions about those things. I
I
think
think,
from
yeah,
a
I think that's
parent
one of I think it's
perspective,
one of the greatest battles we're facing in our time. To be honest,
mm,
that sort of that issue, I think you've distilled it really well.
yeah, I think I've been wondering about it a little bit recently, mainly because of what you know what you see like coming out of America. Thinking about how important is it for a functioning society to have these independent um, institutions that who have the aim or the goal to help the most people, right?
Yeah,
It does sort of. I feel I've sort of become more like impressed with the idea that these things are very important, but in a way, um, the idea of the individual in society is probably and the value that someone puts on themselves and their individual rights and their individual importance is probably at its peak, right? It's probably at its peak for all of sort of recorded history. You can
I would agree.
put all your expressions and thoughts on the internet. There's so many places you could do that if you wanted to. People might pay attention to them or not. But the idea that an individual can change the world, for instance, it's a pretty sort of like embedded Western idea. And I've been wondering a little bit about when I was thinking about this podcast, I was kind of thinking about sleep in that through that sort of prism. Like people think about their sleep even more so now because in a way I think they're focused on themselves as an individual. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I was kind of wondering if those things are related.
Oh, that's
Anyway,
interesting. Yeah,
I'm
no,
rambling
I
now.
think no, I think that's great because I mean, honestly, this podcast exists to allow people to be able to have an awareness and have an individual autonomy within a system that is created for the collective good, right? If that's what we believe, that the system is created for the collective good. So the way that I think about it is in my own personal life is how do I create a subsystem within the system, right? That actually works for me, but still allows me to operate in a functional way in a society that's created around the collective good, where I may not be fitting within that idea of what the collective good looks like.
Mm,
So I think this is this podcast and the things that we do here to give people awareness of the things they can do from an individualistic perspective doesn't mean that you do all of these things at all costs and you don't work within the system, but it does give you the ammunition to choose your own adventure. And
mm.
I think that's a positive thing.
Well, it's a delight, isn't it? If we have the opportunity to choose our own adventure, that's yeah, that's something to be excited by, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, not everybody has that. There's different varying levels of autonomy, right?
Mm.
There's varying levels of autonomy. I've got my own business, right? So if I decided that I wanted to match my timing to my chronotype, I would potentially be able to do it, but then I'd have to also think about the collective good, right? My clients may not be willing to see me at 7 or 8 p.m., right?
Yep, I meet
So
people like that for sure with delayed sleep phase who work for themselves and they operate a business that works to their schedule. You know, they in a way they've tailored their life around their sleep. It's interesting to think about that sleep for them was so important that in the end they sort of gravitated to work that was tailored around the sleep.
Simon, this really deserves a Joe Rogan style 3 hour discussion, but I'm sure you've got lots of things to do. So I really wanted to sort of round up today's discussions with perhaps some tips and some summary as to firstly why is sleep important, and what are the tips that we should should think about when it comes to getting a healthy night's sleep, in your opinion?
Sleep. I think sleep's important, like breathing, eating, drinking water. I think it's there. It's a fundamental pillar of health. It's clear that if you don't get enough, or if it's of bad quality, then you'll suffer. We probably need to sleep to restore our brains and to let our body rest. I think that's probably it in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about what are the tips, I think the lowest hanging fruit usually is waking up during the night is part of sleep. It's okay to wake up during the night.
Mm-hmm.
If you wake up during the night and your mind activates through watching the clock or switching on, then you need to create a lower stimulus environment.
Yep.
Usually that means making it impossible to know what time it is. Have an alarm in the morning. If the alarm's not going off, that's your time to rest. If you're in bed and you're awake, but you're comfortable, that rest counts. That's still rest. Don't let it, if you feel uncomfortable or restless, get up and cool down and come back and start again. Waking up, it's okay. But try not to let your mind stimulate. If the clock's frustrating you or your phone's there, you want to create a low stimulus environment. And sleep should be it should be boring, repetitive behavior. Brushing your teeth, put on your pajamas, go to bed at the same time each night as much as you can. I think that's like the low-hanging fruit of
Oh,
sleep.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's really also very psychologically safe in the sense that don't worry if you wake up. It is part of it. And I think a lot of people would worry, I get up quite frequently and the worry itself of that actually perpetuates the problem, right?
Absolutely.
So, Simon, just to finish, I ask all my guests this question because it gets to the heart of, what we value most. If you could guarantee yourself just one more year of healthy life, and touch wood, you have many more, what would you do with it?
That's a good question. I think that I would probably travel around Australia, maybe circumnavigate Australia, get like an RV or like a combi van, something like that, and drive all the way around Australia. I've been to a lot of Australia, and I've been to every state. I'm from Australia. I was born and bred in Melbourne, so I've gone camping in many places. But that kind of thing, like really checking out all around Australia, like because Australia is so big, so different from a natural environment perspective. I'd love to sort of take it all in for a year. That'd be so nice.
Oh, it'd be amazing. I imagine you'd be going up with the family as well and having some quality time with them.
Yep.
That's awesome. Look, thanks again. As you know, I'm quite interested in sleep, and this season's been all about health, and it fits in so nicely with all the other conversations I've had. And I'm sure the community is going to enjoy this as much as I did. And again, I recognize that you don't do a lot of this, so it's been a real pleasure. And thank you.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, good to chat. Have a good day.
Thanks.
If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.